Today, I'm going to show you how to make bias binding. Now, what bias binding is, it's binding that is cut along the bias of your fabric. It's not only stronger, but it's got some stretch to it. When you are applying your binding to something that has curved edges, you're going to want to use bias binding, because if you use binding that you just cut straight along the grain of your fabric, it's going to be a little bit frustrating and tricky, and it might not work so well. So that's why it's important to know the difference between bias binding and regular binding. And today I'm going to show you a very simple way to make your bias binding. To make the bias binding, I'm going to show you the easiest way I have learned to make bias binding. And you have to cut your fabric on the bias, which makes the binding stronger, but it also makes it stretchier so that it can go around curves like this, because you would not want to do straight edge binding around a project like this. That would just frustrate you. We're going to do bias binding. I'm going to show you how to make it. I'm using a fat quarter. You could also use a half a yard or a yard. And what you want to do is you want to cut off any salvages. Now, because this is a fat quarter, there's just a salvage on the one edge. So I'm going to trim that off to start with. Okay, so now we have trimmed that off. So now what we need to do is cut this on the 45. You want to have a ruler that is wide enough for your fabric so you don't have to move it a lot. Also, you want it to have a 45-degree line. It's on here. I see it right here. This one is the 45. So then what you're going to do, I'm going to shift my fabric down here so I can start in this corner. And you're just going to line up the ruler, that 45, in the corner that you want to start with, right or left, it doesn't matter. And you're lining up that 45 along the bottom edge of the fabric. And then you're going to take your rotary cutter and you're going to cut along that edge. This triangle is extra. You can just set that aside. Now we have our 45, and that's what you want to cut all of your binding strips at, that 45-degree mark. So I'm going to use the markings on here. Now, binding can be different widths. Some people will like 2 inches, some like 2 1/4, some like 2 1/2. Whatever you like is what you want to use for this. For this project, I'm going to use 2 1/4. So I'm going to find my 2 1/4 mark on here. So I've got my 2 inches, and then I'm going to line up the 2 1/4 line. So I've got the 2 1/4 line lined up along that edge that we just cut. I'm going to hold my ruler down and then cut the next strip. Okay, I'm going to slide that out of the way, but make sure you pay attention to the angles at the top and the bottom. We're going to talk about those next. So then you want to just keep cutting every 2 1/4 inches, depending on how much binding you need. Now, I don't need to cut up this entire fat quarter. I need about 25 inches to go around my little jar opener. What do we call this thing? The jar opener. Okay. All right, we've got 2 1/4 lined up here. Our ruler goes, make sure your ruler is going off both ends so that you don't have to move it while you're cutting. Cut the next strip. Okay. Go ahead, slide that out of the way. You continue doing this till you have enough. I'm going to cut 3 strips because I think that will be more than what I need, but and then I can also show you a couple of different things. Now this time I'm going to have to move it. My ruler's not quite long enough, but that's okay. Just cut until you get to a spot you want to stop. Slide your ruler up, but make sure your lines stay where they need to. Make sure everything is lined up nice and straight. Okay, and then just continue cutting off that corner. Okay, that's going to give us more than enough, but I want to show you something else. So I'm going to just keep cutting this as if I was doing a project with a really long binding strip, because this part I'm going to show you is important here. Okay, I'm going to set this piece aside. So now what you might notice is the angles. Okay, so what's important is that you sew them together using the same angle because you're going to lay them on top of each other like this. And so you want the angles to all be going the same direction. But when you look up here, our top angles are not all going the same way. So this one right here, where they're going opposite directions, this is the correct way you want it to be. So we have to fix these. The bottoms are all good, but the tops are incorrect. So we're gonna take and we're gonna line these up. And that was just because of the direction we were cutting the fabric. We were cutting off those selvage edges. So we're gonna lay those three on top of each other. And then we just need to cut these at the same angle that this is cut. So I'm just going to lay this on top. Just like so, matching corner to corner here. So make sure your edges are nice and straight and that it matches at the points. And then just take a ruler and lay that across that line where this top piece of fabric ends and cut that off. You've got these little triangles, but now they're all at the same angle so that when you sew all of these pieces together, all of your angles will match up. So then when we sew them together, what we're going to do is you're going to take one strip, you're going to lay this strip over this way. Now, the biggest thing here is we want to leave a little bit of overhang on each side. I like to leave 1/4 of an inch because that's going to be our seam allowance.
When you are sewing them together, the important thing to note is you need to leave like a little dog ear hanging off each edge. You don't want to line them up corner to point like that. You need to leave this dog ear on each end, and you're going to sew from this intersection all the way to this intersection. We're going to use 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here, but sewing off starting at the intersection and sewing off to the other is going to ensure that they match up when you open them, which is what's really important here. So you can see we've got a dog ear and a dog ear, but when you open them up, your edges match up beautifully. And for this project in particular, you guys, I'm not worrying about trying to match up the plaid. We're not even going there today. So, all right, we're gonna iron our seams open. So you just wanna fold the two seams apart, press them down so they're open. That distributes the bulk evenly throughout. So you want to do that for any of the seams that you have, so as many times as you pieced your strips together. And then once you're done pressing all of those seams open, you're going to go ahead, trim off those dog ears, and then we're going to fold it in half. Now let's go back to the top, fold that seam down by 1/4 of an inch and press. Then you can go ahead and fold all of your binding in half. Make sure your raw edges all match up. Keep it nice and neat as you go along. Sometimes I just do this by hand with my hands and my iron, but I also have this handy little tool. This is called the Binding Ease by Quilted Hearts. You can get it on their Instagram page. It's a silicone mat that you just put your folded binding strip through those little slits, and then you just lay your iron down. Then you just work it through with your hands. So you're not having to move your iron back and forth at all. You're just pulling gently on the fabric. Now keep in mind, because this is bias binding, it's a little bit stretchier. So just pull gently with one hand and then guide it with the other hand, making sure your raw edges stay together. Now we had a little bump there. That's where one of the seams was. So you may have to lift up your iron to make sure everything stays nice and even as you press the entire length of your binding. And since you guys ask anytime this iron is featured in one of my videos, this is my Laura Star Lift iron, and I love it. Okay, the binding is done. Now all you have left to do is roll it up and attach it to your project, and now you have made bias binding. Well, that's how you make bias binding. I hope you found this video helpful. There are several different methods out there for making bias binding. This is just the one that clicked for me, felt like it was the easiest out there, but there are lots of different ways to do things, and I just wanted to share with you what was working best for me. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful, I would love it if you would subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss out on any notifications from all the updates that we have coming your way soon. Thanks for being here, you guys. Have a great day.